The champagne was still cold. I know, because I knocked the whole bottle off the counter when the first slap landed, and I heard it shatter, and I thought, what a waste of good champagne. That's the thing about shock. It doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like a man standing in the middle of his own kitchen, barefoot, on cold marble, watching expensive bubbles fizz into nothing, and thinking about the champagne instead of the hand that's still stinging across his face. My name is Park Seo-joon. I'm 23 years old. I am the bonded omega of the three most feared alpha bosses in all of Seoul. And right now, I am being slapped in my own home by a woman who shares their blood. It started 20 minutes ago, which, if you think about it, is both a very short and a very long time to have your entire sense of safety dismantled. Do-hyun, Ji-won, and Min-ho had been gone since morning. A business meeting in Gangnam. Something about territory lines and men who needed reminding of where exactly those lines were. They'd kissed me goodbye in their different ways. Do-hyun pressed his lips to my forehead and said nothing, because he never needs to. Ji-won grabbed my wrist and pulled me back for a second kiss because he always needs more than one. Min-ho, quiet, careful Min-ho, just looked at me from the doorway for a long moment before he smiled, small and private, like I was something he still couldn't believe was real. I made tea after they left. I watered the plants on the balcony. I was genuinely, embarrassingly domestic about the whole morning. Then the front door opened, and they walked in. I didn't know their mother's name until 30 seconds into the conversation, when she introduced herself the way people do when they want you to feel small. Slowly, with a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Kwon Sunhee," she said. Like poison poured into a porcelain cup. I imagine my sons haven't mentioned me. They hadn't. That should have been my first warning. The second warning was the man standing just behind her. Beautiful in the way that expensive, curated things are beautiful. Sharp jaw, soft eyes, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my entire existence. He looked at me the way you look at something that's sitting in your seat on a train, like I was the inconvenience. "This is Choi Hyun-woo," Sunhee said, and something in the way she said his name, warm, familiar, almost proud, settled in my stomach like a stone. "He was very important to my sons. Before. That single word did more damage than the slap that came later. I tried to be polite. I know, but I genuinely tried. I offered tea. I offered to call the guys. I stood in my own kitchen and smiled the kind of smile you perfect when you've spent your whole life being the person in the room that everyone else is deciding the worth of. Hyun-woo didn't take the tea. He walked around the living room instead. Slow, deliberate, touching things, running a finger along the edge of the bookshelf, picking up the framed photo of me and the triplets from Jeju Island and setting it back down without a word. I felt it before I understood it. That particular shift in the air, the kind that happens right before someone decides to stop pretending. "You know," Hyun-woo said, still not looking at me, conversationally, like we were discussing the weather. "They used to let me redecorate whenever I wanted." "Cool," I said. "I prefer my stuff where it is." His eyes finally moved to mine, and Sunhee laughed, soft, delighted, the way mothers laugh when a child does something that confirms exactly what they already believed. "He's feisty," she said, to Hyun-woo, not to me, about me. Like I wasn't standing 3 feet away. I'm also right here. That's when her expression changed. I won't dramatize the slap. It was fast, clean, and it knocked me sideways into the counter. My palm landed flat on the marble and I gripped it, and I did not fall. I want to be clear about that. I did not fall. But I felt something shift beneath my fingers when I touched the counter. Something that had nothing to do with marble or balance. A pulse. Warm and electric and familiar, the way my ability always announces itself when my emotions spike too high to keep it contained. Images bled through my fingertips like ink into water. This kitchen, these walls, a younger version of Hyunwoo standing exactly where I was standing now, laughing, easy, owned, while three boys who looked like the men I love watched him like he was the center of their entire universe. Oh, that's what this is. The front door opened. I know the sound of their footsteps. All three. Do-hyun's measured and even. Ji-won's quick, impatient. Minho's softer, like he's always half a thought ahead of his own body. They'd come home early. Hand still pressed to the counter, images still bleeding. And from the sudden, absolute silence that swallowed the room, they could see everything. And for exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. I counted. Internally, because that's what I do when my brain short-circuits. I count, I catalog, I find something measurable to hold on to while the rest of the world catches fire. 1. Do-hyun's eyes swept the room the way they always do. Fast, quiet, missing absolutely nothing. His gaze landed on his mother, then on Hyunwoo, then on me, on my hand still pressed flat against the counter, on the champagne still bleeding into the grout lines on the floor, on the side of my face that I was very deliberately not touching. 2. Ji-won made a sound low in his throat. Not a word. Not yet. Just sound. The kind that lives below language, below thought, in whatever part of an alpha is purely animal and entirely honest. 3. Minho stepped forward. Just one step. But in the silence of that room, it landed like a gunshot. Sunhee recovered first. Of course she did. Women like her have been recovering in rooms like this their entire lives, recalibrating, reframing, rearranging their faces into something that looks like innocence before anyone can catch the original expression. "Boys," she said warmly, as if this were a perfectly normal Tuesday. "You're home early? I wanted to surprise you." Yeah, there were a lot of surprises today. Ji-won's eyes cut to me, sharp, searching, that particular look he gets when he's trying to read a room without asking questions out loud. His jaw was tight. I watched the muscle in it jump once, twice, a metronome of controlled anger. Seo-joon. His voice came out measured, too measured, the way his voice gets when he's working very hard to sound calm. "Come here." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was falling apart, and I had a strict personal policy against falling apart in front of people who wanted me to. I peeled my hand off the counter, straightened my spine, crossed the kitchen with the specific energy of someone who has decided that dignity is non-negotiable. I stopped beside Ji-won, not behind him, beside him. He noticed. Something shifted in his expression, quick, private, gone before anyone else could catch it. Hyunwoo was watching this whole thing with his arms crossed and that same curated smile still sitting perfectly on his face. He looked at me standing next to Ji-won, and then he looked at Ji-won, and something moved behind his eyes that I didn't like at all. "It's good to see you," Hyunwoo said, to the triplets, not to me. Like someone who knows exactly how comfortable he used to be in this space and wants everyone to remember it. "All three of you. It's been a long time. Hyunwoo. Do-hyun's voice was flat, not cold exactly, more like a door that has been very deliberately closed. Hyunwoo's smile didn't waver. Sunhee reached out, said she wanted to reconnect. I thought, why not? He tilted his head, and his gaze drifted sideways to me. I didn't realize you'd moved someone in. Moved someone in, I repeated, with the specific energy of a man who has been slapped in his own home and is now running entirely on audacity. That's an interesting way to describe a bonded Omega. Very creative. Are you a writer? You seem like a writer. Jiwon made a noise beside me that might have been a suppressed laugh. Minho pressed his fingers briefly to his mouth. Hyunwoo blinked. Sunhee's warm expression flickered, just slightly, just at the edges, and I felt it, that small shift, the moment when someone realizes the person they dismissed is not going to stay dismissed. Good, I thought. Good. Seo-joon. Do-hyun's voice again, still flat, still controlled, but this time it was aimed at me with something underneath it that felt like careful, deliberate protection. Go to the bedroom. I looked at him. He looked back at me, and his eyes said something his mouth wasn't saying out loud. Something that sounded like, I need you out of this room before I do something that cannot be undone. I'm fine, I said. I know you are. Bedroom. I wanted to push back. I want to be honest about that. My entire instinct was to plant my feet and say absolutely not. I live here too. I have a right to hear whatever gets said in this room. But I also had 3 seconds worth of images still pulsing under my skin from when I touched that counter, and I needed to be alone with what I'd seen before I did something with it. So I went. I walked down the hallway with my spine straight and my chin up, and I did not look back. But I listened. I have always been very good at listening. Minho's voice, low and careful. Omma, what did you do? Sunhee's voice, still warm, still unruffled. I did what any mother would do. I came to check on my sons. And then Hyunwoo's voice, quiet, almost gentle, and somehow worse for it. She just seemed so out of place here. We were concerned. Stopping in the hallway, hand pressed flat against the wall. The images came again. Uninvited, immediate. His hands in this space, his voice in these rooms, his scent layered so deep into the history of this home that the walls themselves remembered him. I pressed my palm harder against the wall. The wall told me everything. Not in words. It never comes in words. It comes in feeling first, then color, then image, bleeding through my palm like watercolor soaking into paper that wasn't meant to get wet. I saw Hyunwoo in this hallway, laughing. Easy, unguarded, the kind of laugh that only happens when someone feels completely at home in a space. Do-hyun was beside him, younger, softer around the edges in a way I had never seen on Do-hyun's face in real life. Jiwon had his arm around Hyunwoo's shoulders. Minho was watching them both with that quiet smile of his, the one I thought was mine, the one I thought I had somehow earned through months of patience and burnt tea and learning exactly how much silence each of them needed in the morning. I stood in the hallway alone, and I breathed through it. Okay, so they had a history. That was not news, exactly. Everyone has a history. I have a history. Mine just doesn't show up uninvited with a designer coat and a woman who slaps people in their own kitchens. I kept walking. The bedroom door clicked shut behind me, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I did the thing I always do when my ability shows me something I was not ready to see. I pressed both palms flat against my own thighs, grounded myself in the present, in the texture of my own jeans, in the specific weight of my own body sitting on a mattress I had slept in for 7 months. You're here. You're real. Whatever you saw was the past. The past is not the present. The past is not the present. I repeated it until my heartbeat slowed. Then I heard Jiwon's voice rise through the wall, and my heartbeat immediately stopped cooperating. I couldn't make out words, just tone, and Jiwon's tone was doing something I had only heard twice before. Once, when a man pulled a knife on Minho at a restaurant, and once, when someone made the catastrophic life choice of mentioning my name in the wrong context to the wrong people. It was the tone that lived underneath all his noise, the one that wasn't anger exactly, but was the thing that anger answers to. Then Do-hyun's voice cut through, short, precise, final. Then silence. The silence was almost worse. I was on my feet before I made the conscious decision to stand, moving back toward the door, and I had my hand on the handle when the door opened from the outside and Minho was there. And for a moment, we just looked at each other through the open doorway. He looked tired. Not physically, the way people look after a long day, but somewhere deeper, in that particular place behind his eyes where he keeps everything he hasn't figured out how to say yet. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said back. He came in and sat down on the bed in the spot I had just vacated, elbows on his knees, hands loosely linked. I stayed by the door because something in his posture told me he needed to be the one to start, and I had learned early that Minho only talks when the space is patient enough to hold him. I waited. "She wasn't supposed to know where we lived," he finally said, just stating a fact that clearly troubled him. "We moved after, specifically so she wouldn't." "So someone told her." He looked up at me. "Yes." "Was it Hyungmoo?" Something moved across his face, not confirmation exactly, but not denial either, which was its own kind of answer, and we both knew it. I crossed the room and sat beside him, not touching, just present. "Minho, what exactly was he to you three?" He was quiet for long enough that I started mentally composing a list of ways to rephrase the question. Then he said, "He was supposed to be ours." Supposed to be. It didn't work. A breath. He wanted the position more than he wanted us. It took us too long to figure that out. I sat with that for a moment, turned it over, looked at it from several angles. "So he's basically your cautionary tale in a very expensive coat." Minho blinked. Then, quietly, helplessly, he laughed. It was small and surprised, and it broke something loose in the room that I hadn't realized was locked. "Something like that." I nodded, filed it away, let the silence settle back into something comfortable. Then the bedroom door opened again, and Jiwon filled the frame, and the look on his face was the specific look of a man who has just had a very unpleasant conversation and is now carrying all of it directly toward the one person he trusts to help him put it down. His eyes found me immediately. They always do, like I'm a fixed point and everything else is just weather. "She wants to stay for dinner." I stared at him. "I'm sorry, she wants to what?" "Dinner." He said it like the word physically pained him. "She said it would be rude to leave without eating." I looked at Minho. Minho looked at the ceiling, with the energy of a man strapping on invisible armor. "Fine," I said. "Then I'm cooking." Jiwon stared at me for exactly 2 seconds before something shifted behind his eyes. Not worry, exactly. More like the particular alertness of a man who has learned to read weather patterns and has just noticed the barometric pressure drop. "Seo-joon." "I heard you," I said, already moving past him through the doorway. "Dinner. She wants dinner. I'll make dinner." That's what I'm afraid of. I ignored him. Walked back down the hallway with purpose, into the kitchen, past the champagne still drying on the floor that nobody had cleaned up yet, which I noted and filed under things we will discuss later. Sunhee was seated at the dining table like she owned it. Hyunwoo was beside her, one ankle crossed over his knee, scrolling his phone with the relaxed energy of someone who has already decided how this evening ends. They both looked up when I walked in. "Great news," I said, opening the refrigerator. "I'm making dinner." Sunhee's expression arranged itself into something gracious. "Oh, you cook?" "Mm-hmm," pulling out ingredients without looking at her. "Sit tight. It'll be about 40 minutes. I felt Do-hyun enter the kitchen behind me. He didn't say anything. He moved to the counter beside me, close enough that his arm almost brushed mine, and in a voice low enough that only I could hear it, he said, very quietly, very controlled, "What are you doing?" It wasn't a question. It was the verbal equivalent of a hand on my shoulder saying, "I see you. I need you to tell me the plan." "Making doenjang jjigae. Your mother looks like a doenjang jjigae kind of situation." "Seo-joon, relax. I'm not going to poison anyone." "Probably." His jaw did the thing, the tightening thing. But underneath it, bare visible, something that almost looked like the edge of relief. He stayed beside me at the counter, didn't leave. That was the thing about Do-hyun. He never said much, but he stayed. In every situation, in every room, in every version of chaos we had stumbled through together, he stayed close and said nothing. And somehow that was always exactly enough. Ji-won had positioned himself against the far wall with his arms crossed, watching Hyunwoo with the focused energy of a man deciding whether something is a threat worth addressing openly or privately. Minho sat at the kitchen island, quiet, present, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, but that felt like it was somewhere between gratitude and concern. Hyunwoo set his phone down. "The apartment is different from how I remember it. We redecorated," I said. "I can tell." A pause. "The plants are new. I like plants." Do-hyun was never really a plant person. I looked up, across the kitchen. Do-hyun was looking at Hyunwoo with an expression that could have been carved from stone. Hyunwoo was looking back with that same pleasant, curated calm. And for just a moment, the air between them carried something old and heavy and complicated that had absolutely nothing to do with plants. Leaning against the counter with my arms crossed. "He is now," I said simply. Ji-won made a sound. Minho looked at the countertop. Do-hyun's stone expression shifted fractionally in a direction that felt like warmth. Sunhee watched all of this with her hands folded neatly in her lap and a smile that was doing a lot of work to appear genuine. "You're very comfortable here," she said to me, not unkindly, but with a layer underneath it that I was meant to feel. "For someone who's been here, what, 7 months?" "8, I said. "And yes, I am." "My sons have always had very strong instincts," she said, like she was paying a compliment and burying a blade in it simultaneously. "Sometimes those instincts need a little guidance from people who know them better." The kitchen was very quiet, internally with great restraint. Guidance. Right. Because nothing says guidance like showing up uninvited with the ex and slapping the current Omega in his own home. Very helpful. Very maternal. I turned back to the stove, stirred the pot, let the silence breathe for exactly long enough to make a point. "That's really thoughtful," I said. "I'll keep it in mind." I felt Ji-won shift against the wall. When I glanced over my shoulder, his expression had done something complicated that I was fairly certain translated to, "I am so attracted to you right now, and this is not the time." Internally, allowing myself exactly 1 second of satisfaction, good. Hyun-woo was watching me now with a different quality of attention. The pleasant mask was still in place, but something behind it had recalibrated. He had expected, I realized, someone easier, someone who would shrink or flush or get quietly miserable in the corner while he and Sunhee ran the room. Meeting his eyes briefly across the kitchen, he was going to need to adjust his expectations. Dinner was almost ready. The jjigae was simmering, warm and dense, filling the kitchen with something grounding and domestic and entirely mine. Quietly, reaching up to the highest shelf for the serving bowls. And that was the exact moment my fingers closed around the bowl that had been sitting on that shelf for months. The image hit me so fast I almost dropped it, gripping the bowl with both hands. I held on, physically, mentally, both. The bowl stayed in my hands and I stayed on my feet, and I let the vision move through me the way I had learned to, like standing in a current instead of fighting it. This specific bowl sitting on this specific shelf, Hyun-woo's hands placing it there, carefully, deliberately, the way you place something in a home when you intend to stay. A Tuesday morning, ordinary light coming through the kitchen window, and Do-hyun standing exactly where Do-hyun was standing right now, watching him, with an expression I had never seen on Do-hyun's face before and hoped to never see again. It was the expression of someone who believed completely that what he was looking at was permanent. Then the next image, faster, less gentle. Hyun-woo on a phone call, voice low, careful, positioned near the balcony door where the sound would get swallowed by street noise. And the words, clear as anything, burned straight through 8 months of ceramic memory directly into my chest. They don't suspect anything. Give me 3 more months and I'll have full access to the Northern Territory accounts. Oh, that's a significantly larger problem than I initially calculated. I set both bowls on the counter, turned off the stove, pressed both palms flat against the countertop, and took one breath, then another, assembling myself back into something functional. Okay, so Hyun-woo was not just an ex with attachment issues and a designer coat. Hyun-woo was an operative. Someone had sent him. Someone had planted him inside this pack specifically to get access to financial territory accounts, and he had spent months building trust and intimacy and the specific kind of closeness that makes people lower their guard entirely. And now he was back, with their mother. Everything suddenly makes a horrible kind of sense. She wasn't guiding her sons. She was running interference. I lifted my eyes and looked across the kitchen at Sunway, who was saying something gracious and warm to Minho, touching his arm lightly, the practiced ease of a woman who has spent decades being exactly what a room needs her to be. Then I looked at Hyun-woo, who was watching me. He had been watching me this whole time, I realized. Not casually. Not the way you watch someone you're mildly curious about. The way you watch someone you are actively trying to assess. He had been cataloging me since he walked through that door, testing my responses, measuring my reactions, figuring out exactly how much I knew and how much I could be managed. The problem for him was that he had miscalculated what I was. He thought I was decorative, a soft omega who cooked and watered plants and filled a space that he had left empty. He thought I was temporary. He had no idea. I carried the bowls to the table, set them down, ladled the jjigae with the specific domestic energy of someone who has not just had their entire worldview rearranged by a ceramic bowl. Sunhee made appreciative sounds. Hyun-woo sat. The triplets arranged themselves around the table with the careful positioning of men who were each individually preparing for something, but didn't know yet what shape it would take. "It smells wonderful," Sunhee said. I almost respected the performance. "You really are talented." "Thank you," I said. I learned from a very patient teacher. Who? Myself. Ji-won pressed his mouth together. Minho looked at his bowl. Do-hyun took a slow sip of water with the expression of a man watching something unfold that he has decided to allow. Hyun-woo picked up his spoon. It's good, he said after the first taste. Genuine, almost surprised. Really good. I know, I said. I was simply making dinner table talk. So, Hyun-woo, what have you been doing since you left Seoul? Something shifted in the room, subtle, immediate. The triplets all went very still in their different ways. Do-hyun's stillness was architectural. Ji-won's was the coiled kind. Minho's was the kind that listens. Hyun-woo smiled. Business, travel, keeping busy. Mm-hmm. What kind of business? Consulting. For who? Various clients. That's so interesting. Consulting is such a broad field. You could be doing almost anything, really. Hyun-woo looked at me, and for the first time since he had walked through the front door, the pleasant mask did something it hadn't done before. It slipped. Just for a second, just enough. His eyes sharpened, and in them, behind the charm and the careful performance, I saw the thing he had been hiding since the moment he arrived. Fear. Good. He should be afraid, because I had touched that bowl, and I knew what he was, and the only question left was how to use it without burning everything down in the process. Do-hyun's eyes across the table was already watching me. He always was. His eyes asked a question. Mine answered. Do-hyun set his spoon down, quietly, precisely, the way he did everything. He folded his hands on the table and looked at Hyun-woo with the particular quality of attention that I had learned meant he had made a decision and was now simply waiting for the right moment to execute it. Hyun-woo felt it. I watched him feel it, watched the micro-adjustment happen behind his eyes, the subtle recalibration of a man who has spent years reading rooms and has just detected a shift in pressure he wasn't expecting. The food really was good, by the way. I want that on record. Sunhee filled the silence the way she always did, smooth and practiced, redirecting the room's energy before it could crystallize into something she couldn't control. Do-hyun-ah, she said warmly, using the familiar suffix like a key she still believed fit the lock. You look tired. Are you sleeping enough? I sleep fine, Do-hyun said. Flat. Courteous. Final. You always said that even when you weren't. A soft laugh. Hyun-woo, conspiratorial, fond. He used to work through the night and then insist he was perfectly rested. You remember. Hyun-woo smiled. I remember. And that was the thing about them, I was realizing. The way Sunhee kept handing Hyun-woo these small conversational gifts, these you remember moments, these invitations to plant his history back into the room. It was deliberate. Every single one of them. She was redecorating with memories, the way Hyun-woo had once redecorated with that bowl, staking claim through accumulation, through the casual intimacy of shared history. Setting my own spoon down, folding my hands on the table, very pleasantly. That's so sweet, I said. I love hearing old stories. Sunhee looked at me, warm and genuinely interested, like I was not about to do what I was about to do. Hyun-woo, how long were you three actually together? Because I want to make sure I have the timeline right. The table went very quiet. Ji-won's hand stilled around his glass. Minho looked up from his bowl slowly. Do-hyun's eyes moved to me with an expression that said several things simultaneously, the loudest of which was something between, "What are you doing?" and "I trust you completely. Please don't blow up my apartment." Hyun-woo's pleasant expression held. Barely. About a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And you left, what, 2 years ago? Something like that. And in those 2 years, tilting my head, conversational, easy, you've been consulting.
Traveling. That's right. Interesting.
Because I heard a rumor recently about a consulting firm operating out of Busan that specializes in corporate intelligence. Another pause. Territory accounts, specifically. The kind of silence that has weight, the kind you could press your hand against and feel push back. Hyun-woo looked at me, and the mask, that beautiful, expensive, carefully maintained mask, developed a crack that started at his eyes and moved downward, and I watched it happen with the specific satisfaction of someone who has been patient for exactly the right amount of time. Who told you that? I read a lot. Ji-won moved, not dramatically, not loudly, just shifted his entire body in his chair to face Hyun-woo directly, with the focused stillness of a man who has been waiting for permission to be dangerous and has just received it. Repeat that, Ji-won said, low, controlled. What firm? Hyun-woo's eyes moved between me and Ji-won and then to Sunhee, and in that single glance an entire conversation happened that I was not supposed to see but saw anyway, because I was watching for exactly that. And what it said was, this wasn't supposed to happen this fast. No, it wasn't, was it? Sunhee set her chopsticks down with a small, precise sound. When she looked at me this time, the warmth was gone, not replaced with cruelty, which would have been easier to categorize, replaced with something colder and more considered. You're quite observant for someone so new to this world. I'm observant for someone, period. My son's world is complicated, she said, like she was explaining something to someone she had underestimated and was now recalibrating her approach for. The people around them need to be vetted carefully, thoroughly. You understand. Completely, I said, which is why I'm wondering who vetted Hyun-woo. Because from where I'm sitting, that process had some gaps. Minho made a small sound. I was fairly certain it was involuntary. Do-yeon stood up, not aggressively, not loudly. He simply rose from his chair with that architectural stillness of his and looked at Hyun-woo with an expression I had never seen directed at another person in my 8 months in this apartment. You're going to tell me the name of the firm, the clients, and everything you shared about our operations. Hyun-woo opened his mouth. Not a question, Do-yeon said. Sunhee looked between her son and Hyun-woo, and for the first time since she had walked through that front door, I watched something move across her face that looked a great deal like the beginning of panic. Good. She should have vetted me, too. The dining room held its breath. Hyun-woo sat very still in his chair, with the specific quality of stillness that has nothing to do with calm and everything to do with calculation. He was running numbers behind those pretty eyes. Exits, options, how much I actually knew versus how much I was bluffing, whether the ceramic bowl theory was something he could discredit if he needed to. Run the numbers, sweetheart. They are not going to add up in your favor. Do-yeon remained standing. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. There was something about Do-yeon in this particular mode that made raising his voice feel redundant, like bringing a flashlight to the surface of the sun. However, the firm, the clients, the timeline of what you shared and when. Hyun-woo exhaled through his nose, slow, controlled. Then he looked at Sunhee. That single look told me everything. He was not going to protect her. He was going to calculate exactly how much he could hand over about his own involvement while repositioning her as the architect. I watched the decision happen in real time across his face, and I felt something cold and clarifying move through my chest. He is going to sell her out, and she knows it, and she is about to try to get ahead of it. Sunhee straightened in her chair. "I think," she began, carefully, with the composed energy of a woman restructuring her narrative mid-sentence, "that this conversation has gotten away from what it was meant to be." What was it meant to be? "A visit," she said, as if that were still a reasonable framing for the current situation. "I wanted to see my sons. I wanted them to have closure, with Hyunwoo, with that chapter of their lives." "Closure," Minho repeated. "Quiet. Careful." He had that look he gets when he is holding something very heavy, very gently, because he knows if he grips it too hard it will break, and he is not yet sure he wants it to break. "You were all so young," Sunhee said, and her voice shifted into something softer, something that I suspected had worked on all three of them at various points in their lives. "What happened between you and Hyunwoo hurt you. All three of you. I watched it. I thought if you could see him again, have a real conversation, you would finally be able to move past it." "And the territory accounts?" Silence. Because the closure explanation is lovely, but it does not explain the phone call Hyunwoo made from your balcony 2 years ago about the Northern Territory accounts. So I am just wondering how that fits into the moving on narrative. Sunhee looked at me, and this time there was no warmth left at all, not even the performance of it. What looked back at me across the dinner table was sharp and assessing, and fundamentally unbothered by being caught, which told me something important about who she was underneath the gracious mother routine. To her sons, pivoting cleanly, ignoring me entirely. "He is going to be a problem," she said. Conversational, matter of fact, like I was a variable she was reclassifying in real time. I blinked. To the room, genuinely. Did she just refer to me as a problem out loud? While I am sitting right here? At a table I set? Jiwon pushed his chair back and stood up, and when Jiwon stands up with that energy, the entire atmosphere of a room reorganizes itself around the fact. His voice had dropped into something I had not heard from him before. Not anger. Something older than anger. Something that had been living underneath it for a long time. "You came into our home. You put your hands on our Omega. And now you are sitting at his table, eating his food, and calling him a problem. I am going to need you to explain to me, slowly, each word deliberate, what version of this evening you expected to walk away from." Sunhee met his eyes without flinching. Whatever she was not easily rattled. "I expected my sons to remember where their loyalty belongs." "It belongs to him," Jiwon said. Simple, immediate, zero hesitation. Something moved through my chest at that, warm and sudden, and I did not have a name for it that felt adequate, so I just held it there and kept breathing. Hyunwoo stood up. Everyone looked at him. He straightened his coat, looked at the triplets with an expression that had finally, completely, dropped every layer of performance. What was underneath was tired. Actually tired. Not strategically tired. The real kind. Quietly, to Do-hyun specifically, "The firm is called Haesong Consulting. The client who approached me initially was not your mother." A pause. "It was your father." The room full of people all stopped breathing at the same time. I looked at Do-hyun. Do-hyun had gone completely still in a way I had never seen before. Not the architectural stillness. Something deeper. Something that looked like the moment before a building decides which direction it is going to fall. My father has been dead for 4 years. Hyunwoo looked at him. It was the most honest thing he had said all evening. Has he? Nobody moved. I counted again, old habit. 1, 2, 3. The silence stretched past 3 and kept going, and I let it, because some silences need to finish themselves before anyone should speak into them. Do-hyun was still standing at the head of the table. His hands were flat on the surface now, pressed down the way mine pressed down when my ability is trying to flood through me and I need to stay contained. His face had done something I did not have a word for. It was not grief exactly. It was not rage. It was the expression of a man looking at a wall he built 4 years ago with his own hands and watching someone walk straight through it like it was never there. Explain. Every word. Right now. Hyunwoo sat back down, not because anyone told him to, because the energy in the room had shifted into something that made standing feel structurally unsound. Like he was disarming something as he spoke. He reached out 18 months ago, through an intermediary. I didn't know it was him initially. The client profile was clean, the money was clean, the brief was straightforward. Corporate intelligence on the Northern Territory accounts. I took the job. When did you find out who it was? Minho said. His voice was very soft, the careful kind of soft that is actually the loudest thing in a room. Hyunwoo looked at him. And I believed it was honest because it cost him something to say it. 3 months in. And you kept working, Jiwon said. I kept working. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Jiwon turned away from the table, walked to the window, stood with his back to the room and both hands braced against the frame, and I watched his shoulders rise and fall with the specific rhythm of a man talking himself down from something that does not want to be talked down. I looked at Sunhee. She was watching her sons with an expression I was still trying to categorize. It was not guilt, exactly. Not relief. It sat somewhere between the two in a complicated middle space that told me she had been carrying this for a long time and was not entirely unhappy to put it down, even in a room that was currently on fire. To her, directly, because someone had to. You knew. She looked at me. A pause, then quietly, yes. For how long? Another pause. Longer. Since before I came here today. Internally, with great exhaustion. Of course. Of course she knew. She had not come here for closure or reconnection or any of the gentle things she had dressed this visit in. She had come because something was shifting, because Hyunwoo's position was becoming unstable, because if the information was going to come out anyway, she needed to be in the room when it did, so she could manage what came after. Out loud, to no one in particular. So the whole dinner was a controlled demolition. Minho, very quietly. Seo-joon. I'm just naming it, I said. Someone should. Do-hyun lifted his hands from the table, straightened, looked at his mother with an expression that was somehow more devastating than anything Ji-won's visible anger had produced, because it was so completely without heat. Where is he? Sunhee held his gaze. After a moment, quietly, Busan. He has been there for 2 years. He is not well, Do-hyuna.
That is part of why we're in Busan. A private facility outside the city. He has people with him. He is... Did he fake the death? Do-hyun said. Flat, clean, surgical. Or did you help him? Sunhee looked at her hands. And in the looking, in that single small drop of her eyes, she answered him without a word. The sound Do-hyun made was very small and very quiet, and it was the most painful thing I had heard all evening. I stood up. Not dramatically, not loudly. I just stood up and crossed the room and positioned myself beside Do-hyun the same way he had positioned himself beside me in the kitchen 4 hours ago, close enough that my arm pressed against his. And I did not say anything because there was nothing to say, and I had learned from him that sometimes staying close was the whole sentence. He did not look at me, but after a moment his hand moved, found mine at my side, and held it. Tight. The way people hold things they are afraid of dropping. Internally, holding on just as hard. "I've got you." Ji-won turned from the window. His eyes were red at the edges, which I had never seen before, which felt significant in a way I was going to think about for a very long time. He looked at Hyun-woo with exhausted clarity. "You're going to give us everything. Every document, every communication, every transaction, tonight." Hyun-woo nodded. Once. No argument. Ji-won looked at his mother, and his expression did the thing Do-hyun's had done, went somewhere past anger into something quieter and more permanent. "You should go." "Ji-won, tonight, Oma. Not cruel, just done. Go tonight." Sunhee stood, smoothed her jacket, looked at each of her sons in turn with something that might have been love, or might have been grief, or might have been both at the same time, and then her eyes moved to me one final time. "Take care of them," she said, looking back at her with equal steadiness. "I was already doing that," I said, "before you got here." Sunhee left without another word. I watched her walk to the front door with that same composed posture, that same careful spine, and I thought about how much energy it must take to hold yourself that straight when everything underneath is crooked. The door clicked shut behind her, and the apartment exhaled, all of it, like a living thing that had been holding its breath for hours. Hyun-woo remained at the table. He had his phone out, pulling up files, transferring documents with the quiet efficiency of a man who had already made his calculation and was now simply executing it. Ji-won stood over him and watched every screen with the focused attention of someone who would absolutely notice if a single file went missing. I looked at Do-hyun. He was still beside me, still holding my hand. His eyes were fixed on the middle distance, on something I could not see and did not try to name. And I stood with him in it because that was what he needed, and I knew it the way I knew most things about him now. Not through my ability, just through time, through paying attention, through choosing him back every single day the way he chose me. "Hey." He looked down at me. His eyes were tired in that deep architectural way, tired in the foundations, and I did not try to fix it because some things do not get fixed in a single evening. They just get carried together instead of alone. "You okay?" "No." "Yeah," I said. "Me neither." Something shifted in his face, small, private, just for me. Not a smile exactly, something warmer and less defined than a smile. Something that lived in the space between relief and gratitude, and a feeling that neither of us had gotten around to putting a clean word on yet. His thumb moved across my knuckles. Once. Slow. With the specific, helpless warmth of a person who is absolutely in trouble and has fully accepted it. I was so gone for this man. All three of them. I was completely, thoroughly, ridiculously gone, and I had stopped pretending otherwise approximately 6 months ago. Minho appeared at my other side. He did not say anything. He simply stood there, shoulder touching mine, present the way Minho was always present, like a quiet fire, steady and warm,
and entirely reliable. Jiwon finished with Hyunwoo 20 minutes later. He took the phone, the documents, two separate external drives that Hyunwoo produced from his coat pocket without being asked, and then he looked at Hyunwoo for a long moment, with an expression that had finally finished being angry and arrived somewhere sadder and more honest. "Did any of it mean anything to you?" Hyunwoo looked up at him, and for the first time all evening, he did not manage his expression before answering. What came through was unfiltered and tired and real. "Yes." "Just not enough," Jiwon said. Hyunwoo did not deny it. Jiwon nodded once, stepped back. "You know the way out." Hyunwoo left, and then it was just us. Just the four of us in a dining room with cold jjigae and a broken champagne bottle, and the specific atmospheric weight of an evening that had dismantled and rebuilt itself 3 times in the span of a few hours. I looked at the table, looked at the food, looked at the mess. I just reheating the food. Jiwon stared at me. "Seo-joon." "You need to eat," I said, already moving toward the kitchen. "All of you. You cannot process a family conspiracy and a resurrection reveal on empty stomachs. That is not how crisis management works." Minho laughed. It came out surprised and genuine and a little broken at the edges, and it was the most beautiful sound I had heard all night. Jiwon dragged both hands down his face. Then he followed me into the kitchen. Do-hyun came last. He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched me reheat the pot with an expression I felt on the back of my neck before I turned around to confirm it. Turning, meeting his eyes. "Stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" he said. "Like I did something impressive. I just asked a man about his job at dinner." "You dismantled a 2-year intelligence operation with a ceramic bowl and a question about consulting." "When you put it that way, it does sound a little impressive." Jiwon dropped into a kitchen chair. "A little." Minho set 4 bowls on the counter without being asked. Our rhythm. Our ordinary, specific, entirely ours rhythm that had nothing to do with territory accounts or fathers in Busan or ex-omegas in expensive coats. Just 4 people in a kitchen at the end of a very long day, choosing each other in the smallest and most certain way. There was still so much ahead. The father in Busan, the accounts, the questions that did not have answers yet. I knew that. I was not pretending otherwise. But right now, the food was hot, and the kitchen was ours. And Do-hyun's hand found the back of my neck, warm and gentle and sure, and I leaned into it without thinking. "Yeah, I was already doing that before you got here. And I was going to keep doing it long after." And that is where we leave Seo-joon tonight. Not at the end of his story, but at the beginning of something real, something warm, something that was fought for and earned and chosen, quietly, in a kitchen, over reheated jjigae. If this story found you today, I do not think that was an accident. Maybe you needed to see someone walk into a room full of people who underestimated him and refuse, completely and without apology, to shrink. Maybe you needed to be reminded that being soft does not mean being weak, that being loving does not mean being foolish, that the most dangerous person in any room is sometimes the one standing quietly at the stove, listening to everything. Seo-joon knew his worth before anyone in that room acknowledged it. And I hope you know yours, too. Here at Lunar BL Stories, this is what we do. We build worlds where love is complicated and messy and absolutely worth it.
where the omega is never the weakest link, where the slow burn is always worth the wait, where every story we tell is made with care, with intention, and with you in mind. If this story gave you something today, whether it was a feeling, a moment, a single line that hit different, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. We would love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us which moment stopped you cold. Was it the ceramic bowl? Was it Ji-won saying, "It belongs to him," without a single second of hesitation? Was it Do-hyun holding on like he was afraid to let go? Tell us. We read every single one. If you are new here, welcome home. Subscribe to Lunar BL Stories so you never miss a new story. We drop new episodes regularly, and every single one is built to make you feel something real. And if you have been here from the beginning, you already know. This channel was made for you. It has always been for you. Until the next story, we will see you in the moonlight.